Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. Should cell phones be banned in schools? Just one of the many questions I asked when I caught up with John R. McCoy, who was on a church mission in Colombia to talk about his book, The American High School Experience, A Flawed Human Business. And I bet we can guess what you did for a living.
I was a high school principal.
Okay.
Yeah, my career spanned about 36 years. I was a high school principal for 25 of those years. I was actually an assistant principal for 9 and a principal for 16.
Wow.
The last 3 years were the COVID years, and I was working in the district office as an assistant superintendent.
Yeah. What school district?
Spokane Public Schools for 17 and a half years, and Riverside School District north of Spokane for about 21 years.
So if anyone knows the American High School Experience, you would, right?
Yeah, and because that's what I did. I was in high schools the whole time as an assistant superintendent. Of course, I was, covering, elementaries and middle schools and stuff. But my I would say my active career was all high school. I taught, coached, and it was an administrator in high schools.
And it was a flawed human business is your subtitle. What do you mean by that?
Well, as I say, and I think in the introduction, and a lot of people in our country and probably in the world, kind of put us on a pedestal and think that teachers and administrators and everything are, expected to be perfect in the decisions we make and perfect in the things we do. And yet, because the entire business of high schools is about people, things that we do and things that occur naturally are flawed. Parents would say to me, well, I can't believe the teacher called that kid an ass or whatever. And I'd say, really? You can't believe that? Has your kid ever been an ass to you at home?
Yeah.
We have people and they make mistakes. And my job as an administrator is to help them get better and improve those mistakes. But not all those teacher mistakes mean they need to get fired, but they need to get better for sure. And some they do need to get fired.
Right. Well, do you talk about the parents whose children never do anything wrong? No matter what they do, they never do anything wrong?
Yes. In the book, there's a little bit about that. Yeah. The book is kind of laid out in categories, laid out with stories, interesting, sad, happy, victorious situations and failures and expulsions and different things. But it's laid out in 3 categories: the funny, silly, sad, happy things that students do, the silly, ridiculous, bad, happy, good things that teachers do, and the good, silly, ridiculous things that parents do. So it's really broken into those categories, followed up with commentary by me, some of the keys that to success in some of those situations laid out where people can read it, teachers, administrators in training or whatever, and say, well, this is what John McCoy did. What would I do? How would that look if I didn't? And just shows kind of our response. Our meaning, my assistant principals, myself, teachers, and how we respond to the crazy things that people do.
Give me an example.
Well, one that I would say is one of my favorite stories. A story about a kid named Matt who had a terrible, difficult life growing up. He was in a home that was dilapidated, falling apart. His mother was a drug addict, had no money. His sister was living with another person who was married to another person, had a couple of kids, and no room for him and no money for him. And his situation was just dire. He had nothing. He was about a 6'9" kid, and every coach in the school wanted him to play for them. And but he couldn't function without his basic needs being met. And then finally, a family who was in the band, I think it was, said they had another son that they were friends, and they brought him in, and to watch the magnificent change that occurred when he finally had his basic needs met I talk a little bit there about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so the turnaround that kid had was just remarkable and fun to see. Then there are other experiences where a kid gets into a fight and I end up expelling him because it was his third fight in school, and another administrator in the central office decides that no, he shouldn't be expelled, and bring him back to school, and then a kid ends up getting murdered. And so, some things like that are pretty devastating. Not all the things are fun and silly, and there's some pretty serious stuff. A gang group brought a bomb to school, blew up a bathroom, and fortunately nobody was in. Anyway, so there's a variety of stories just that were daily, and I say in the book, this is like 100th of the experiences we've had. The truth is, I didn't write down a lot of these experiences as I went through my career. I had to sit down for years and come up with stories that I remembered and how they went, and talk to people about what they remembered, and put those things together. And so, there's hundreds and hundreds of other stories that I just don't remember. They're just daily things that happen. And I'm starting to kind of put those together again, just in some notes that I have in my phone, actually, to try to remember, how many more, because there's just hundreds and hundreds of stories that any administrator really in the country has. And most people don't write them down. And I was one, I didn't write them down either. Nobody has time.
Yeah.
And so when I began to put it together, it took years, it took 10, 12 years to put that together, and just, without making huge effort, just kind of tracking it, because my friends said, you got to write this stuff down. And so I began to do that, 15 or so years ago. In earnest was probably the last 7 or 8 years. Had I been a little more with it, I would have kept a journal of my job like that. But I don't know an administrator alive that has time to do that. There's no more happening place on this earth than an American high school. That's what I think. It's just, you don't have a second.
Right. What can we do for teachers? Do you talk about that at all?
There's a chapter in there about teachers and the silly, ridiculous things they do, and how I responded to those, and a little bit of conflict with the union because of the protection. I mean, one of my philosophies has been forever that for example, when I was a teacher, I never joined the union. I thought, if I'm a lousy teacher, get rid of me. I don't need a union to protect me for doing stupid things. So, and because it's such a people business, it's a flawed human business. I don't believe that we should have unions protecting teachers that do dumb stuff. I don't think when your product is a child, you shouldn't be a union, because that protects teachers from doing bad things to children, or bad things, in the situation. Now, I wasn't trying to get rid of teachers. I love good teachers, and there are thousands and thousands of them. But my experience has been that the unions overprotect, and the contracts, you will never find, put it this way, you will never find a teacher contract that has anything in it about the kids. It's always about less work for more pay. And I've always been supportive of teachers getting more pay. They need more pay. But I don't really talk a lot in this book about the support teachers need, but I do talk about the support I gave. Because there were fantastic teachers, do fantastic things. If they're willing to admit their errors and move forward, man, I was there to help them, support them. If they weren't willing to admit their errors and they did lousy job, then I was there to say, no, we're not going to have you here because our kids are too important for that. And so there's a lot of good things in there about, hey, this is what I did. I was in every classroom every day. I don't know of any administrators that do that, but that's what I did because I wanted to. And so that there's some things in there, and it really has at its roots that relationships matter more than anything. And so that's kind of what it's mostly about.
Are you able to get this book to teachers, to school administrators? Do you still have ties with the school that you worked with?
I do, and I can. One of the plans is to get this into the hands of people who are in administrative programs. For example, I got my master's degree in public school administration, and there's a class that all of administrators have to take during their administrative internship. In other words, when they're teaching, but they're taking time out to go work with the administrators in the school. There's it's called a practicum or an internship. And there's always a class associated with that where the administrators get together and they have a time with either a seasoned administrator or a PhD person somewhere in the colleges, and they say, hey, tell me about your experiences today. It would be perfect for that kind of a class where they say, hey, this is let's read a little bit about what McCoy's book says. What did he do in this situation, and what would you do? And it would be really good for that. And it is a good book for teachers as well, because teachers often don't know what happens behind the scenes. This book is really, really a behind the scenes book. What's happening with the administration and the kids that are in trouble that the teachers don't necessarily know is going on, because it's always confidential. Student discipline is confidential. We don't make announcements to teachers and say, hey, so-and-so got suspended because they were watching porn on their phone in class.
Right.
So yes, it would be good for them to know, and the teachers that I've had read it already have responded really positively, saying, "Oh my goodness," and people say my mind's been blown 100 times already because of some of the things that happened that I wasn't aware of. Things of that nature. Conversations with parents and things that people are not aware of, how that goes down. Yeah.
So real quick, should there be cell phones in school? Should they be banned?
Absolutely, they should be banned. In fact, when I didn't spend a lot of time on this. I have one good cell phone story in there, but or a couple, but absolutely they should be banned. If I were to write a new law, it would be that cell phones would be out of schools, and coming up with ways. We actually went through a time when we sent a letter home to parents. We had really good support. This was probably around the 2015 years, and we bought pouches for teacher doors where kids would put their cell phones as they came in. We had a little mini research that a teacher did, where in one 55-minute class period, there were over 4,500 interruptions on cell phones in one class period. Yeah, it was stunning, and it was wonderful for the 3 or 4 years that we kept cell phones out of schools. And we had some issues where a parent was really angry, saying, "No, you can't take my kid's cell phone." And I said, "Look, I'll bring it to you, 25 miles. I'll take it to you. I'll bring it to you after school. But I'm telling you, your kid's going to be better off without it during school." Anyway, we had a few battles like that, but most of the time, our parents were very supportive, because I sent a letter home and said, I laid out the issue. Here's what's going on. And after that, after I left the principalship, that was a battle that they didn't want to fight. And so, cell phones are kind of back in at that school. And so it's kind of difficult. But that's coming around now, where a lot of places are looking at that again, because it's just too much of a distraction.
Good enough. Well, listen, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you talking to me. It's been good to talk a little bit about the book again.
All right. And good luck in Columbia.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We need it.
A licensed psychotherapist and energy healer, Lorraine Castro, has written a book with healing powers for all of us. It's entitled Tara and the Earth Girl. What exactly is an energy healer?
I transmit energy and people heal.
That's amazing. What made you decide to publish a book?
Well, my daughter brought me a drawing of two characters. One is Frumply, who was an elf, and Tidworth, who was a mushroom-shaped guy. And she said, they want you to write a story about them. And I said, oh, okay. She, at the time, was about 16 or 17. And so that's all. She handed me the sketch, and I don't know, sometime later, the story just kept coming in. It's about the fairy realm, and they pick their names, and they actually gave me the last chapter of the story before I even, wrote it. So it was crazy.
You mean the story came to you?
Yes.
Before it was even near wrapping it up?
Yes. And they chose their own names. And it was really a riot. I loved writing the book.
So what's the story? How does the story go?
It's about two girls, one from a dystopian Earth and one from another planet, and they're find themselves together in the fairy realm, and they're of service. And it's a fun book. It's very adventurous.
What is the fairy realm?
The fairy realm is where the fairies exist. The one that's not the Earth Girl is Tara, who is a being of service. As people do in her world, they are obligated to go to other places and be of service.
What do they have to do?
Well, they're heart wish listeners, which means the head magician, Seguin, listens to people's dreams and wishes through his magic mirror, and they go and perform it. For instance, one of the situations is a little boy, an 8-year-old boy who is very sad because his grandmother is very ill and going to pass away. And so he sends Tara and to her team. She works with fairies and elementals and other kind of people, and she takes the message of hope and the fact that it's her grandmother's time, and she needs to be on the other side doing other things. And so that, she goes at night and she climbs in the window with her little team, and they work on all the people in the family, including the pets.
And they work on helping them accept what is going to happen. So they're not necessarily going to change it, but they're helping them accept that. That is so soothing.
Mm-hmm.
A neighbor said to me once she had suffered so much tragedy in her life. She had lost 2 husbands. She had lost 2 children to cancer. And I said to her, Irene, how do you deal with this? And, her faith was so strong. And she said, God doesn't make things happen. He doesn't make bad things happen, but he helps us deal with it.
Mm.
And I know your book isn't religious based, but it's the same kind of thing.
Yes.
Something that helps you get through it.
Mm-hmm. But the thing that's so exciting about this book is that it's embedded with this energy work, so that when someone reads it, it turns on previously dormant DNA, and they find they have talents they didn't have before. And one of my readers is reading it for the second time. She said, "Oh my God," she said, "I'm doing new things." I'm like, for instance, she was this one was one of my clients, and she's very much a victim. And for the first time, she found herself looking outside of herself and being able to see the other person's perspective and their motive for why they were in an argument with her. And she thought, she said, she's reading the book the second time because she's getting so much out of it.
And you're saying that if I read this book, that I will find new energy.
You will. It's according to what what you are ready for, but it animates these DNA, and all of a sudden you will find you're clairvoyant, or you can lucid dream. You can fly in your dreams. It's amazing. It's really a trip.
Now, is this part of a series?
I'm already maybe a third of the way through a sequel.
Are these characters helping you promote the book? Have they given you any ideas for that?
No.
No, I mean, are you sharing this with your patients? Are you sharing it in your office or your home?
Oh, yeah.
Are you going out and talking about it? What are you doing?
Thus far, I have just shared it with friends, people, clients, my office, and that people are just raving. They really are.
This is a very sweet book. Is it for all ages?
Yes, it's written for a young adult. The characters are 15 and 16, but
Okay.
the adults who are reading it are getting so much out of it. It's not just for. It's not any limited age.
Okay.
It's like it gives you a sense of right and wrong. It teaches a lot of lessons about being of service, being a good person. Like there's a horrible monster who is really horrible. He finds Tara, and he all of a sudden he is going to, you know, to try and get her. Also, he's created some horrible beings who threaten their life when they go out. And so it's adventurous, it's fun, it has humor. It's just a wonderful book. I'm not saying that out of vanity, because really it was co-written with the Fairy Realm. But I think it's just a kick. Anyone would love to read it.
All right, Lorraine, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alice.
Tragedy was the catalyst for Treniese Gill to start writing as part of her healing process when she was a teenager and her mom attempted suicide. Now a mother of 3 children, all under the age of 9, the experience inspired her to write a 3-part children's book series to help kids deal with their emotions. This is the second part of her children's book series, Feelings Schmealings, Moving to a New Home. Welcome back, Treniese. Now, last week we talked about the first part of your series. I just remembered I missed you about your daughter dealing with the loss of your mom. Now, part 2, Moving to a New Home, also deals with that loss, doesn't it?
Of course, that relates to my kids too, because, we just moved to a new home and I was like, it'd be kind of cool to write about this experience too. And pretty much it's really relatable to everything that we went through, with them kind of being angry about missing certain things. And so we moved around the same time my mom passed 5 years ago. We moved just to kind of get some new scenery, I think that was part of my grieving process too, was just kind of like, I need to get out and I need to move somewhere else. Just to not get rid of the memories, but just kind of move forward,
Did you need to move far away?
No, we moved about 15 minutes away from the old home.
Okay.
But it was just a new setting, breath of fresh air, sort of.
How old were your kids at that time?
My oldest was 4. My middle child had just been born. So my oldest kind of didn't want to move out of her room because she kind of had a few cool things in her room she would really miss, mainly like the glowing stars on the ceiling. Her closet we had individualized, so it had like her own little desk in there and just certain things that she's like, I will never have this anywhere else. And so, when we moved, it was kind of like a blank slate, But then she kind of realized like, hey, this new house has some cool features too, and we have some cool new neighbors. And so it was a process, but I finally got her out of my bed after about 2 months. She was sleeping in her own room.
Because she just didn't want to be in the new place.
Right. And I think it was a comfort too. Like she didn't know the new place. So it was like a comfort just sleeping. And the baby was in the room with me too. So all of us just bundled into the room when my husband would go work. He's a firefighter, so he's gone for several days at a time.
What did she decide that she liked about the new place?
So she definitely liked our neighbors. We have some backyard neighbors. They share a fence with us in the backyard, and they kind of jump on the trampoline and talk to each other over the fence. So mainly the new friends, I think, is what made her feel more comfortable. And then we started personalizing her room, painting it a new color. We let her pick out her color, and she found a cool little hiding space in the new house. It used to, I don't know if it was a trash chute or what it was, but it's like a cool little hiding space that her and her sister like to use. So there's a little girl in the book, and she's explaining, this is my home. This is where me and my mom used to dance. This is where me and dad used to watch movies. This is where this used to go, and this is where that used to go, and I'm not going to have that anymore. And it's kind of like she feels like she's losing, her place. And then she gets into this new home and she realizes, like, hey, this new home has some pretty cool things too. And I like my new neighbors. And, it actually shows her, waving to new friends across the street. It shows her looking at the different rooms in the house. Like, I love my new room. I love the new living room. I love the backyard and how spacious it is. So it describes different places in the home that she's starting to like over time. She takes her old glowing stars from the ceiling that was in her old house and she puts them up in her new room. That was one of the main focuses.
So she loved those stars.
Yes. She can't rip the paint off the walls and, she can't take the bookshelves that were, put into the wall. So it was kind of like, this is the thing I could take.
So when you wrote the second book, you told us when you wrote the first book that you took it into the school and you got some really good reaction. So when you wrote the second book, did you get similar reaction?
Oh, yeah. So, mostly kids that were saying like, I moved to a new house too, or, just relatable. It's very relatable to kids that age. And they were just kind of relating to the fact that they had just moved to a new place or a new environment too. So they were explaining to me like all the things that they liked about their new place during question and answer time. So that was really cool.
So after this book, you went a step further and you had a question and answer time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything stick with you?
Well, there's a few foster kids at that school that were in my kids' class that were kind of like, I don't get to have that. I don't get to have that in my place. And I'm like, one day you'll be able to buy your own home. And these are the things that you can have in your own house.
They didn't have stars on their ceilings?
Yeah, they didn't have stars on their ceilings or painted walls. And, so it was kind of like, these are the things that happen to kids. They move around a lot,
Sometimes, yeah, unfortunately. All right, Treniese, well, next time we're going to talk about the third book in your series, Feeling Schmealings. Nothing went my way today. Something I think kids any age can relate to. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.